Hi there. Welcome to Discussions with the Fascia Masters. My name is Deanna Hansen. I'm the founder of Fluid Isometrics and Block Therapy, and I'm being joined by my nephew, Quinn Castellane, my partner in Block Therapy, and our very special guest, Cassidy Papaioannou, who's been with our program as a certified instructor. Cass, how many years now have you been certified?
I certified July 1st, 2019.
Okay, so coming on, well, 3+ years already. That's amazing. Yep. And you've done some amazing things. Like you've really tied together a whole number of different aspects of fitness with your understanding of blocking as well. So you really have something incredibly special to share. So why don't you just jump out, let everyone know what you started with prior, how you found us, and then what you're doing now.
Okay. So hello, and thank you for having me, both of you. I have been a fitness leader going on 30 years. And throughout that time, like basically I started until I figure out what I want to be when I grow up. But throughout that time, I kept taking more specialties and, pool and cycling and group fitness and personal training, many different modalities, and Pilates being one of them, which had a huge impact on the way I taught my classes. It really sort of catapulted my understanding. And this comes on top of a phys ed degree. So I already feel like I had a bit of an advantage over the average fitness leader, because the anatomy training that I had was so much greater than an entry-level course that a fitness leader might take. So in many industries, we have to continuously stay abreast with new products and research, etc. And I think I remember sitting right here in this room, flipping through a conference brochure of a conference that was coming up, reading through the session description. And, as you're based on what your curriculum is that you're most commonly teaching, that you'd be drawn to those things. So if it was like, kids in sport or something, that's really not the people I work with. So it's like, no, next. So I'm reading through this conference brochure and it says something about fascia. I was like, what's that? I don't know. Doesn't pertain to me. Next. And then I, at another time, came across that word again. And I was like, no, next. And it was the third time I saw this word fascia. I'm like, all right, something's up. I need to figure out what this is and how it pertains to my participants, how it pertains to my program. And I need to figure this out. So I started on a quest. I'm really not one who wants to do a lot of research by reading. I'm really grateful for the people who love to do the research, and I just want to find them and find out what they learned and, give me the goods. So I started paying attention and looking around for programs that deal with the fascia and create benefit for the fascia. And I went and took them, which I think is very much like how all of our participants are going to make their choice. They're going to try things and see how it fits or feels in their body and make their choice based on that. So I found the MELT method, which I signed up for, and I went and I took 6 weeks of programming. There was a yoga ball class running at the studio that I work at. So I went and attended many of those classes, and I attended a foam rolling workshop, of which I was already a little bit familiar with the foam roller. So I had some exposure to that. And I'm trained in the Stott or Merrithew method of Pilates, and they had come out with a course for fascial integrated movement, I think it's called. And I took an intro course to that, and none of them were really grabbing me. I liked parts of this one. The yoga ball was probably my favorite of them all. So for different reasons, I liked or didn't like them. And then what happened is I'd stepped out my back door, slipped on the ice. I'd really wrenched my back, my hip, and I ended up joining a hot yoga program just for my own fitness. This is not for me to make sure how other people are getting through their workout, etc. This was absolutely dedicated time for myself to just realign, rehab my own body. And I was in a class where the block therapy was used. And it was like a really profound experience. It was really impactful. And what was kind of ironic was I was like, wait a minute, I own that product. It's at home. I saw you guys, both of you and Heather, at a Manitoba Fitness Council workshop at Cindy Clausen Pool years prior, before the fascia was on my radar. And I remember distinctly being in that class and going, like, laying on the block and thinking like, oh my God, like, when is the 3 minutes up? Like, I don't think she's timing. You know, it was kind of uncomfortable. But I bought the block that day and I had the DVD. And so I came home and I dug it out and I started using it, getting really curious about it. And I saw a coworker using it on her lunch break. And I asked if she would allow me to come and join her. So I was spending a lot of time with the blocking. And I started noticing some really significant changes in my flexibility. You know, for example, some poses that were at the yoga studio that I could do this, but I could see neighbors around me doing this. And I wasn't competitive about their ability to do it, mine not. But one night after I got off my block, I was like, you know, I think I could do that. And I just got on the floor and I did it, which was like, I don't know, 12 inches of change of position from what I would normally consider myself to be able to do, or my limit. So it was really a significant change in my flexibility. And with the Pilates program that I love, I think it's fabulous. You know, there's always the promotion of improved core strength and posture and overall strength and flexibility. But there were so many clients that I was seeing that the flexibility promises just kind of weren't, I didn't feel like they were living up to what was kind of promised. And so I started playing with the block with my clients, many of which have been with me over 10 years. Many of my clients come like twice a week. They've been over 10 or 15 years coming to me twice a week. And so they really allow me some space to play or experiment on them from time to time. And so I started experimenting with them with the block and had some really ridiculous changes. So can I share 2 stories?
Please, yeah.
So there was one gal who had had a fall, and for like 16 months, we looked back and figured it out afterwards. It was about 16 months that she had limitation in her arm movement. So we'd be trying to do something and she'd flinch and she couldn't do a particular range of motion. And I would say, you know, are you seeing a physio for this? Are you seeing a massage? Or like, what are we doing about this injury? Because what we are doing is not working. And, you know, I'm not a therapist. Like, we need more help here. And she's like, yeah, I'm seeing this person, I'm seeing that person, and now I'm seeing this. There was a number of different practitioners she'd seen to try and help with this shoulder. And so one day in the mat class, Pilates mat class, I told her, I said, you know, this was with you in mind that I'd like to try this. And so I put them on the side rib cage to try and target the lat area. And we had foam rollers is what we had at the time. And she couldn't tolerate it. You know, her breath was taken away. So I'm like, okay, let's get off. And I made it softer. And she could tolerate it, she could breathe it, but she looked pretty uncomfortable. And I told her how to continue with it at home, like just the foam roller against the wall so she could really control her pressure. And the following week, she came back to class and she did child's pose. And while she was doing child's pose, I looked at her and thought, I'm not sure. I can't remember if she was able to do that before. And so when she lifted her head up, I asked, like, could you do that last week? She says, no. And so we made like I don't know, the degrees of range of motion improvement in her shoulder, like, was just ridiculous in 1 week's time. And it's on my Instagram feed fairly early on, about that, which that was a huge thing. And then there was another woman who walked into class one day, and Quinn, this might be too early for you, but to me, she looked like a typewriter. So here's her pelvis. Deanna knows, she's giggling. Here's her pelvis, but her rib cage and her shoulders looked like over here. And I was looking at her going like, oh my gosh, like, what happened? And she says, well, I slipped on the ice getting into my car, but I'm going to go see the chiropractor later. And I'm like, okay, you know what? We're going to block you today. And so everybody in the class was doing their Pilates work, and I had her blocking. And I happened to see her twice that week. And when she returned later in the week, she looked much better, and she actually canceled her chiro appointment. She was feeling way better. So it has been like magic. Like, in my toolbox of tricks that I have to make a modification or adaptation for people, like when they are struggling with a position or to problem solve, etc. Like, it's kind of been like a magic wand in my toolbox. It's been that catapult, like the Pilates was. Like, I just have so much more resource now to help people. And prior to COVID, I actually signed up for the level 2 training of the block therapy, which is the postural assessment. So I only just started to get into that before COVID hit, and I had to learn how to use technology to continue reaching my clients. So I really haven't finished that module, but it's already changed the way I cue a lot of my Pilates exercises. It's changed the way, like, I was teaching Pilates for 20 years. And I learned so much more about teaching the breathing. Like, I was really undervaluing it, about teaching the core, about what things feel like, about posture, etc. It's like hot sauce, It's been a great addition. I love it.
That's fantastic. And isn't it wonderful? Like, when you have those moments when you see that you've literally changed something for someone, or not you, but like, showing them what to do for themselves, or guiding them. And like, that's just so empowering, right? Like, as an instructor.
Oh my gosh. I have a woman right now. She is, she's 78. She comes for Pilates Reformer. She's got a cruise coming up in a month, less than a month, but there's been something in her ankle or her foot that's been bugging her for so long. And we finally kind of sorted it out just in the last month or two. And after I gave her these stretches to do, she came back and she's not feeling the pain anymore. She's going to be able to go on her trip and walk and be painful. Like, it's really, I'm so excited for her to go on this trip and feel so much more comfortable to just walk. It's amazing.
Quinn, isn't it so neat how, the teachers that are coming, like, you can just see the heart, right? Like, you just care so much about, your clients and their well-being. And that's just so apparent. And I feel so blessed because we just really draw in such amazing people to share this with others.
And that's what it's all about. It's about connecting to each individual to help them heal. Of course, we have the whole online business, the membership and whatnot. And that's great because it can reach people who don't have access to a certified instructor or therapist. But to be able to teach and see those transformations, like that's the coolest part. That's always been the coolest part. I remember I was so deep into the bodybuilding, weight loss, aesthetics piece of it when I first started. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to more so bring block therapy to bodybuilding and really to the fitness industry, which to an extent, like, yes, this is going to be a big piece, but it was when you and I went to LA to work with Doug, and he had scoliosis, and to see him say that I feel like I am no longer in a physical and mental restrictive prison anymore from the 4 or 5 days we spent with him, I'm like, okay, I think I need to get my priority straight with who I want to address. And it's not just people who want to look a certain way or be super strong. All that's important, sure. But again, people are in pain. People wake up every day not looking forward to it because they're in so much pain. They don't have a solution, or they don't have the right mobility to do something. It's like, that's where it comes down to helping people. Like, let's get those people, because like, what more can you ask for as an instructor or a therapist, right?
Yeah.
Make them excited about life again.
So many of my clients are, because I teach weekday at the Wellness Institute where I primarily work. Most of the clients that I have, which was about 50 different clients that I would see every week, they are women that are retired age because they're available weekday to come and see me. So they are now at that point in their life where they are starting to prioritize their own wellness. They're starting to address any chronic pain that they're otherwise been living with. And perhaps they're feeling that they're in I think of this because you say trapped in the body, this prison. They can feel that they are living in a body that is feeling older than they feel. That it feels like an older body than they want to be living in. And so they're prioritizing some time for themselves now to improve things or change that.
It's kind of scary to think that, like, to bring my mind there, because I don't believe that I'm going to get to that point, part of my manifestations, and because I have the tools, but I don't want to get to that point where I feel young, but I physically can't do those things anymore. Or I'm like, man, I'm like 35, I'm 35 years old, or I'm 40 years old, and I'm waking up every day in pain. Like, I was able to do everything in my 20s. And I was just playing golf with someone recently who's 65, and he's like, I really started noticing the things I couldn't do when I was 30. As soon as I turned 30, I didn't know if it's a psychological thing or whatever, but I just couldn't do the same things, or I was gaining more weight, and then I wasn't as mobile. I didn't have the same energy. I think there is a psychological component to that as well. Absolutely. That's why we shouldn't always be going by numbers from a chronological age perspective. But there's a tool to reverse all of this, or to slow down the aging process and to get people out of pain. That's exactly what you're doing. It's really kind
of like the Tin Man with an oil can.
That's a good analogy. Yeah.
100%.
Well,
let's
Cass,
get the oil moving.
Yeah, for sure. And what I love with what you're doing, Quinn and I had the wonderful opportunity of coming to you and experiencing one of your reformer classes. And that was amazing. And what I just love about block therapy, first of all, is that it really does complement anything else. So, for our instructors, if you have other tools or other passions or whatever it may be, this becomes this wonderful complement. And so everything is helpful. And that's the wonderful thing. Everything is helpful. But really, when you marry things together, that's when things become like just, exponential. And I just loved our session that, you worked us and you worked us though in a kind way. And I worked myself to the level that I could. And I love the fact how I felt the next day. Like I felt those sore spots in my back through those extensions you had me doing. And it was so beautiful. But then of course, then I could just go and lie in my block. And then I got rid of the pain pretty quickly, which was nice to know too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's amazing to see how able you guys both were, because you have no prior experience with that piece of equipment.
Mm-hmm.
But the core strength you both have, the flexibility that you both have, you were not doing beginner things on the reformer. So it's I think a real testament to the abilities that you can develop with the blocking, the fitness that you can develop with the blocking.
And Quinn, that's reminding me of the first time it might not have been the first time, but like early on when you started yoga, and then you were saying like, how you could do these things.
Oh yeah.
That, to talk about that a bit.
That's a great point, actually, because I needed to take a break from bodybuilding. I was so heavy into it. It was ridiculous. And I'm like, I'm not even feeling that great anymore. I'm like, I kind of need to slow down or do a change. So I said, okay, I'm doing 30 days, not working out, like nothing except for yoga and block therapy. So I get into the yoga class, and you don't realize, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, you don't realize how flexible you are until you try to do these movements after doing block therapy. So I didn't really, and this was a while ago, Deanna, this must have been 7 years ago, like
Yeah.
a while ago,
Mhm.
maybe even longer. I could have been 20. Okay, no, I'm 27.
You are.
So 7
Yeah,
years.
it would have been.
I'm like, am I 29? I forget. But the first class was obviously very challenging. It was like an hour and a half hot yoga session, and I was dying in there. But I'm like, I'm doing actually pretty decent. Like, I'm looking around, there's other fit people in there doing it, and I'm like, okay. But it was when I came back the second, third, fourth time, I was exponentially increasing my flexibility, my strength, and everything, because I've incorporated the two modalities of fascia decompression and yoga, which is how I view it, a combination of flexibility and strength training at the same time in a very graceful way. And wow, you can get through these things, or you can kind of do whatever you want a lot quicker. That's kind of how I see it. It's because you're optimizing your connective tissue, you're optimizing your body. All we're doing is removing the blockages so that our body can just start working the way it's supposed to work. Weight training isn't going to remove blockages. Yoga can absolutely help, but it's not releasing the grip of the connective tissue, right? Like, massage can help, but it's not going to be a tool that can necessarily be deep enough to release it. Chiropractic can help, but it's not going to get to the root cause and release the fascia. Like, so many people don't incorporate or even really have an idea of what fascia is. And a lot of people say, excuse my French, that it's bullshit. And it's like, no, look at the social proof. We don't need scientific proof of this. Look at the social proof. How many testimonials do we have? It's got to be thousands. How many testimonials do you have, Cass? Probably quite a few, So from the accumulation of it all, it's like, it works.
Yeah, but I have the program that I do almost primarily is like by Zooming, which is a result of COVID. But I mean, I do have the reformers, which you guys got to try, but I only have 2 reformers. So like, I can see more people, I can serve more people by Zoom because it can be a group class, right? And the way I sort of what I have done is I have found, I have a yoga-like class, I call it, because I'm not an authentic yoga instructor, but I have a real depth of education. I try to respect the boundaries of yoga where complexity is, I'll reserve that for those, expertise. But I do teach a yoga-like class, and it has kind of been my signature class for over 20 years. People have been coming and loving it and asking me to have it more than once a week, etc. So this is what I went to during COVID, is the blocking and the yoga. And I've always believed, ever since I took the blocking, was that it was such a good marriage of programs. Because the way I describe it, I use a ton of analogies, because I believe I will remember things if I understand them. If someone tells me to do something a particular way, but I don't understand why I'm doing it, I'm not likely to do it the same way again. But so I really try, in a very language-friendly way, really educate all my participants why we're doing things, the way we're doing them, etc., so that they own that. They are now empowered to make some informed and educated choices for themselves in whatever program they're doing. So the blocking, to me, as you said, Quinn, you need the release to happen to have that opportunity to like move the needle on the flexibility. To me, the blocking, just like a massage would, but the blocking, I think, creates a longer window. I think those releases create a window of opportunity for us to create a flexibility change. That's where the yoga Pilates fusion class that I teach becomes that compatible partner. So we've done all the blocking to a particular region. They're two separate classes, but throughout the week, you keep dosing, right? So they now get to move their body, their hip, their shoulder, their back, whatever, through a range of motion that they couldn't do before because they're in this window of time. And now when they get not from A to B, but now they're in C, they've got to build the endurance, the stability, the strength, etc., to hold their body in C and gain that flexibility. And that's where I believe that we move the needle. Like, I've never considered myself to be a flexible person, but now I kind of do. Like, it's really changed.
Well, and Quinn, and it was your dad years ago that asked me, what's the difference between a yoga session and a block session? Like, what really is the difference? And it was such a great question because, it was kind of the first time somebody like really framed it to me that way. And it was like, okay, so, and I mean, I was training to be an Iyengar yoga instructor myself, and I love yoga and the benefits. And it was like, okay, so because I would go to these classes, and it was really profound for me when I was doing this, because I would go to the classes, and I was fairly new to yoga at this time, but because of all the work I had done, I was, quickly able to go to the advanced classes, and then I'm in the teacher program. So there's these teachers that have been in these classes for like 20 years. So now we're doing, say, like a triangle pose, and, fast forward 2 years, they're still doing the same thing. Like, they haven't really moved beyond the edge that they were going to. And where each week, what I would do is I would find, okay, like, I'm limited here. This was actually before blocking. This was only when I was using my hands, actually. And then I would use my hands, fluid isometrics, in the stuck spots. And then I would go from like the B to the C. And then each week I was progressing. So I was making these really, amazing gains with my flexibility. So then when your dad asked me that, like, and I had to frame it, I thought, well, because when you're stretching, we'll just call it stretching for ease of whatever. If you're doing like a hamstring stretch, you have available what you have. And the goal with stretching is to keep it at the greatest length that you can. With blocking, we're releasing that stuck tissue to, as you say, Cass, add more of that window. So like, we have now more tissue to lengthen with the stretch. And so that's the difference. Like, we're actually, by the releasing of that adhesion on the bone, now we have more tissue to play with and to lengthen and to integrate. So
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure like we both thought this and we're meaning the same thing, but let's think of like wet spaghetti noodles. And let's think of a hamstring, right? So there's a bunch of these strands, let's call them muscle fibers / fascia fibers, but they're not all perfectly linear. They're supposed to be, but they're not. None of us are perfect. We're all a mess and we're trying to fix that. But let's say there's like a bunching in there. Now that length that was, let's say, a foot long has now become 9 inches long. And now it's like, okay, well, let's stretch that 9 inches. Well, it's like, well, I can't really stretch the 9 inches much further anymore because there's like that bunching and it's held up and glued, trapped with all these adhesions and compression.
Like that.
Oh, I thought you were saying there's like noise or something. But yeah,
no.
exactly. Like with the microphone or with your headphone. So block therapy releases all of those adhesions that are pulling the wet spaghetti noodles into a fist and a knot like this, so that we can slowly lengthen them. Then when we lengthen them, we're kind of persuading it a little bit more. So it's like, okay, we just did a block therapy session, we just release it, but now let's do yoga or Pilates or some sort of lengthening / strengthening class. Then they become longer. And now you're actually, like, as you mentioned, Cass, moving the needle. So if you have a compression so dense in your hamstring or wherever it is in your body, how are you going to be able to release that if the fascia can pull you out of alignment and hold you out of alignment with a force of up to 2,000 pounds per square inch? Stretching just doesn't allow you to release such a powerful force. You need to use a dense tool, stay there for a decent amount of time, minimum 3 minutes, and connect the breath. That's the magic to releasing the connective tissue, and then lengthen, and then block, and then lengthen. And what you were mentioning, Deanna, and this is what I think everybody can do this, but it was intuitive for you to do in the moment. Okay, let's say I'm trying to improve my forward bend. So some people just kind of go hold the stretch and just breathe, and they're making faces because it's painful, and stretching is painful. Block therapy is also painful, but you didn't just do that. You're like, where's my first restriction? Oh, it's at the base of the hamstring. Let's block there. Release that. Oh, wow. That's further now. Where's my second restriction? Oh, weird. It's in my glute. I never would have thought that. So then you block your
Calf.
glute. Yeah. And then you go deeper. Then you're like, my calf is hurting.
Yeah.
Like, why is my calf holding me back? So you work through it in that way. That's a very effective way to create flexibility on your own without really having to follow any instruction. It's just an intuitive thing Deanna did. And then there's classes that Deanna's taught where you can even do that. And it's brilliant. So it's the combination of the two that's really going to get and gain you flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're doing, Cass.
Yeah. I have
exactly what we do.
when you talk about like that sort of web, etc. When I'd fallen off a horse and reached out to Deanna for some advisement on rehabbing, etc. And she talked about how it's like all the fascia is kind of in chaos, you know, and then if you ice it, you kind of marry it to that chaos, you like freeze it. And so again, analogy queen, it's become a personal game of mine to come up with analogies. So I think of like, you know, when someone has an injury and the fascia is really disrupted or chaotic, etc., it's like having a really bad hairdo and then putting a lot of hairspray on it, like, you know, or being out in a windstorm and then putting hairspray on it. Like it's just a mess. And like to put hairspray on it, can you imagine how long it takes to get a brush through that or get that undone? You know?
That analogy, that's a brilliant analogy.
You tie it up over here and you hold it and it's like,
Yeah.
That's really good. That can also be used for an injury, icing an injury.
Well, that's exactly what that's what I mean. Yeah.
Oh, that's what you mean. Okay. Well, then brilliant. That's really good. Wow.
Cass, you are great at explaining these analogies. And I remember because you were doing a PowerPoint for a group and you were sharing it with me. And I loved it because you explained something in a way I had never thought of before. And I just loved it because it brought so much sense when you were talking about when you're, you know, putting the block up against the bone, how basically like everything is getting sandwiched. So you're getting this equal.
Yeah, panini press.
Yeah. So talk a bit about that, because it was just like, aha, yeah, there's another one to just bring this beautiful understanding into something that's really simple, but hard to comprehend unless you make it simple, right?
Well, and this is like, so again, to go back to some of the other things that I tried and that I didn't end up choosing, to me, a couple of them were like, you know, you do this, this, and this. It was like you stand up or you lay down or whatever. Do you feel the difference? It's like, I guess. And I just couldn't get excited about bringing that back to my people, you know. But when you use the block, the reason it is more effective, the reason I think it has such impact is because it penetrates deeper through the tissue than something with give like the yoga ball. And so you guys had very wisely chosen a material for the block that so replicates the density of bone that when you lay on it, you've got your bone here. Say you've got you're laying on your thigh, for example. So you've got the bone of your thigh weighted down onto the block. Well, the tissue between the block and the femur, the bone, are getting sandwiched between two like objects. This is not something you haven't heard before, but the tissue inside can't tell which one's bone. Like it's like, oh, I know this guy. Oh, I know this guy. Like it's just totally safe because
they're friends.
Yeah, they're so similar that it's so safe. Yeah, there's another analogy I came up with too. Like it's so interesting how you can continue to find new ways to move on the block. And one of them is like, for example, on the glute, rather than, you know, rotating the leg or changing from a straight leg to a bent leg, etc. I use my other leg, so if it's under my right glute and I've got my left heel on the ground, I actually sort of try to slide my whole body like that typewriter to the right or the left, so that I'm creating sort of gliding of tissue. So going back to my anatomy knowledge, there's layers and layers of muscle. And as I described, like, you know, for example, we do the forearm, like nothing is supposed to be adhesed to anything else neighboring it. Like in terms of our dexterity of our fingers, there's so many ribbons of muscles in here that allow us all this fine movement. None of those ribbons of tendons and muscles, et cetera, are supposed to be glued or gummed to the neighbors. And if you make your bed and the sheet sticks to the duvet, it makes making the bed really easy, right? But you don't want that in your body. You don't want the layers of skin stuck or adhesed to the layer of muscle below or to the layer below that. Everything is supposed to be slippery and independent and have freedom. So just that gliding creates that little bit of shearing, I guess, of the layers.
Yeah. And we about, I don't know, Quinn, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, we had done a Fascia Masters discussion with Gil Headley, and it was really great because he did the fuzz speech video that I had watched years ago, which was so helpful because it really brings your understanding to how impactful scar tissue really is in the body. And so now we're talking with him, and, you know, of course, over the last decade plus, he's deepened his understanding of the fascia. And he said, you know, as he continues to shear these layers further and further apart, he found a new fascia, which he termed perifascia. And as he's describing that, I said, that's what we're blocking. And it's not just to have the tendons and the muscles, it's literally to have every cell independent of every other cell. So every cell can be like that and it doesn't get stuck. So yeah, cool.
Yeah, we just want to be a slippery, gooey mess inside.
Yeah.
Non-chaos, non-chaotic.
When you put it like that, I'm sold. Slippery, gooey mess inside. I love that.
Keep the chaos up here, but you know.
Too funny.
Oh, that's great. Cass, is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners so that they know all that you're about, anything that you haven't touched on that you do, that you love to do?
You know, I'm really flattered that you commented that I really care about my clients, because that's something that I hear often from that one woman that I mentioned with the foot thing. She's, you know, she says that to me all the time. And, you know, I would love to help anyone that is, you know, if they're feeling uneasy about getting started with, you know, the video independent practice and you want some guidance. One of my other clients by Zoom, they were skeptical about doing classes by Zoom, that what is she going to be able to see or whatever. She posted something from her. She's like, oh, she sees, she can see, you know. And I've a couple of times even said to someone, I'm like, was that an inhale? And they're thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, let's do that again. Let's reset, you know. And if you know what to look for, right? You know, as you get that trained eye, et cetera. So if someone is feeling like they know they need to get started, but they're a little worried about getting started and you want some guidance, like, I'm not promising anybody here a beach body or a bikini body. That's not the way I work out. And I shared with you, Deanna. I work out a little on the kind side, you know, which I feel somewhat guilty about as being a fitness instructor. But I'm not a boot camp girl. Like, I'm not that girl. I have had a lot of injuries myself in my own body from my sport of riding horses many years before. So I've experienced a lot of injuries in my body. So I understand what other people are experiencing in terms of limitation stuff. So I have I can understand what you're going through and know how to kind of adapt those things. And I have 3 grandparents, 2 that made it over 100 and 1 that made it really close. Like, I believe by my genes, I have a long way to go. And I just exercise really kindly. I would be honored to help anybody that wants some personal guidance on getting started. to join my Zoom program. I would be honored to help you and incorporate that yoga fusion. Again, it's a very beginner friendly yoga class. Most of my clients, or many of my clients, are in their 70s. So and I've got, I'm 50, 51. And so it's just a very kind mobility, balance training, some core strengthening, some overall strengthening, etc. Like I'd love to help.
I like how you said you're not like a boot camp girl, or you don't like that kind of exercise. I don't really think there's actually that many people that do. So that's why I think a lot of that form of exercise turns a lot of people off for the idea of exercise.
Well, and perhaps a lot of people feel like if they're not working that hard, that they're not exercising.
It's so false. It's so false.
Yeah, so there's so many places people can go if they want to work out really hard. Like there's so many people that want to promise you all of that. I don't. I don't.
Well, and let's think of all the people in the world. What grouping of those people in the world exercise? Then out of those people that exercise, how many of those people like a really hard workout boot camp, sweating, feeling sore for 3 days after? It's really not that large of a grouping of people that actually want that. So what about all the other people? Yeah. I think movement's extremely important. We all need to move. That actually helps with our connective tissue as well. Like we need to move. We can't just be sedentary and live a sedentary lifestyle. So yeah, I think also we were talking about this before we started recording, but why do people always think that you need to be sore after a workout? Right? Like there's times where you will absolutely be sore. And Deanna and I, we were both sore after we finished the Pilates class with Cass. And that's good. But it's not like it was hard for me to stand up and sit down. There's certain areas where I'm like, okay, yeah, but your body will start to adapt and get strong as you do that. So even if you're not sore after, that's kind of the point. You don't want to be sore all the time, because if you are working out 3 days a week, 2 days, 4 days, 5 days plus, and your goal is to be sore after every workout, you're sore every day of your life. Why do you want to feel in more of a weaker state for everyday life when the whole point of going to the gym is to strengthen yourself for everyday life? Right.
Like I just returned from a trip to Canmore, and my husband loves biking. He got me an e-bike. So I went and joined him e-biking. We were putting on like 25 to over 50 kilometers a day of biking. Now, e-biking, I can make it really easy if I want to. But my point is, my fitness level with what I'm doing allows me to go to Canmore and do a couple average hikes, do a decent distance of bike riding, and I'm not sore the next day. I can go and live.
Yeah. And when I was like in my 20s and as an athletic therapist, again, that was when I was, heavy and working with elite athletes. So I worked really hard. I was, Tae Bo. I was 45 minutes on the Stairmaster. Like I forced myself. I would get literally lobster red, as if that's healthy. I would be in such a state of like, like breathing so heavy because I didn't understand how to breathe. But also all of my efforts made me bigger and it created more pain. There was nothing positive for me. Like
not much of a reward.
No, there was only like the opposite of reward. And for all of the efforts, and I mean, then it would cost money because I'd be like all of these things. Right. And so there was zero reward. There was only setback after setback. So then you're like, well, then I got to work harder. So then you get caught up in this really strange mindset. And then I'm a failure, because then you do see people in the gym doing weights and doing whatever. And you're like, that's what I want. And I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing or that I was taught or thought I should do. And so you're putting in all this time and effort and you're going in the wrong direction. And when I finally started, and it was really the introduction for me was yoga, to really understand that it's not about that. It's about restoration. That's really the key here, because we are all so flogged with toxins, you know, our body needs to learn how to get rid of these. So when you're working really hard and you make yourself that much denser, you're storing them even more in your body. So then we become toxic on top of dense and all of these things. Like, no wonder people are, you know, feeling off a lot of the time. So yeah, yoga was such a beautiful introduction for me because it really taught me so many things that I didn't learn in my athletic therapy education. And then from there, you know, we just keep going forward. So Cass, thank you so much. This has just been super enlightening. And I think, you know, anybody watching this is just going to fall in love with you. And we have, and you are such a beautiful instructor and your heart does lead. That is very evident. And I think there's a lot of people that need you. And I think you were going to give people an offer if they wanted to try something first.
Yeah. So if someone, you know, wasn't really sure what you're signing up for, if someone would like to just email me and let me know that you saw this offer on the Fascia Masters discussion, then I'll provide a Zoom link that you can trial a block class with me, or trial a yoga Pilates fusion class with me, and see if that's going to align with what you are looking and needing for. Looking and needing.
That's awesome.
Looking for and needing.
There we go.
And I'll have your email address below this video as well, so people can contact you. And yeah, you're a very intuitive, in the moment teacher, which I really enjoy. You're not 100% always by the book, if that even really makes any sense, or if there is really a book, but you get people. And I remember you mentioned something like that too. So that's a big telltale if you're a quality instructor and you're top notch. So I loved what you did. I want to do more. And I'm like, I want to do this more frequently, because I was sore, but it wasn't like, okay, I can't move sore. Right. It just felt like a good kind of sore, and you feel good after the workouts. Mm-hmm. Some workouts, you're just tired for the rest of the day. Some workouts provide more energy. I felt like I actually felt more alive and ready to conquer the day, kind of thing. So that was awesome.
Yeah. Well, and Deanna, you've met my friend Sylvia too, but she used to attend my classes at when she still worked at the wellness with me, and I'd say, do you want to see our class plan today? She's like, sure. And I'd say squats and bicep curls, and I'm like, well, I started making lesson plan for today, and then something happened and I got distracted. So when you talk about the intuitive part, I'm really grateful for my 30 years experience, because I mean, even on the Zoom, as people start tuning in, it's like, okay, how's everybody today? Does anyone have any requests or whatever? Like, oh, I hurt my shoulder. It's like, okay, all right, let's start, and in terms of the intuitive, I can pivot depending on what's arrived in the class that day. So.
And you made that really clear at our Pilates session, because, you just kind of took us in, and then we went based on what we were capable of doing, and you adjust in the moment. And that's what we need to do, because, everybody's coming at us with a different ability to start with and where they're at. So that again, just shows your experience and your years of wisdom. And I'm really just so grateful you've brought block therapy into your toolbox. So you've got that as well. Me too. As well as all of your other wonderful things that you're sharing, because it all works together. And that's the beautiful part. We all get to choose different things. And when you can marry certain things together, it's just exponentially that much more profound. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all the fantastic content that you guys have created. It really is a great service to everyone who finds it.
Wonderful. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thanks, Cass, so much, and Quinn, and thank you all for listening. And of course, reach out to Cass. She's got a lot to offer.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All information is below. Make sure you like the video, subscribe, and follow for more stuff. And all of her content is listed below. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.